July 3rd. According to US media reports, the US government has lifted export restrictions on chip design software to China. Siemens, Synopsys, and Cadence Design Systems have all issued statements confirming they received notification from the US government, resuming software and technical services to Chinese clients without requiring further government licenses. This reversal is significant because the US government's export controls on chip design software to China had only recently been implemented. On May 30th, Donald Trump suddenly attacked China on social media, alleging that China has completely violated the tariff truce agreement reached with the United States in Geneva, Switzerland. He then immediately banned the provision of electronic design automation EDA software to all Chinese enterprises. EDA, often called the mother of chips, is crucial for integrated circuit chip development, from design to manufacturing, packaging, and testing. It's a critical link in the semiconductor industry supply chain. Although EDA software constitutes a relatively small share of the overall semiconductor industry, its role is vital. Chip designers and manufacturers rely on it to develop and test next-generation chips. At the time, this US move was widely seen as a response to China's rare earth export controls and an attempt by the Trump administration to gain leverage in trade negotiations through technological suppression. However, after just over a month, why did the US government suddenly lift this restriction? There are several key reasons for this abrupt change in policy. 1. US couldn't withstand China's rare earth countermeasure. The most direct reason is that the attempted countermeasure proved effective and the US couldn't endure the pressure. In April, as a countermeasure to US tariffs, China imposed export controls on several medium and heavy rare earth elements. This move directly targeted the US as Achilles' heel. The US is a major global exporter of military equipment, and high-end military manufacturing relies heavily on rare earths. Beyond the military, rare earths are also widely used in civilian applications, such as electric vehicles and wind power generators, all of which are highly dependent on China's rare earths. Under these circumstances, the US had to use chips as leverage to persuade China to relax rare earth controls. US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen publicly called out on July 1st, stating her expectation that China will accelerate rare earth exports. 2. Domestic EDA growth in China lessened US leverage. Secondly, when personnel at Chinese domestic EDA leader Wada 9 Days Wada Jushan and Huawei Labs heard about the EDA ban, they likely felt a sense of relief. For years, domestic self-developed EDA companies had been quietly expanding their market presence, but struggled to dislodge the established market share of US-made EDA. The US always believed that by choking off EDA, China's chip industry would suffocate. However, it turned out that they were hurting themselves. Chinese domestic EDA companies have consistently faced the challenge of difficulty getting in the door. Domestic enterprises have long been accustomed to using foreign EDA tools, leading to insufficient motivation for domestic substitution. Last year, Zhao Peng, chief scientist of Fedong Technology, a leading domestic RF EDA enterprise, pointed out in a public technical seminar that domestic EDA companies generally face the problem of difficulty getting in the door, meaning a large number of domestic enterprises have long been accustomed to using foreign EDA tools, and there is insufficient motivation for domestic substitution. Moreover, domestic EDA vendors rarely cooperate with advanced foundry enterprises, and there are and lacks upstream and downstream linkages. International giants possess complete full-flow tool chains and can prioritize cooperation with advanced wafer fabs to develop PDK process design kit for advanced processes. Domestic EDA tools, however, are often a step behind in supporting advanced processes unable to meet the needs of high-end chip design. Customers tend to choose mature solutions for critical tools to avoid the risk of tape-out failures. However, the US supply cut broke this technological dependency inertia. Domestic chip design enterprises, especially those involved in critical fields, faced a survival crisis and were forced to seek alternative solutions. This pressure significantly weakened the reliance on international giant tools, providing an opportunity for domestic EDA tools. As NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang recently admitted in an interview, the US sanctions on AI chips to China have failed. NVIDIA will never find another Chinese market, and withdrawing from the Chinese market is extremely regrettable. Huawei's AI chips have already surpassed the performance of NVIDIA's H200. In October 2022, the first round of bans on high-end AI chips H10 was imposed. In October 2023, the ban was expanded to include specialized Chinese versions of H100 and H800. By May 2025, a nationwide ban on the H800-derived H20 chip was implemented. NVIDIA's market share in China plummeted from over 90% absolute dominance in 2020 to around 50% in 2025. The most direct reason was the backlash from the US AI chip sales ban. The ultimate result is that Nvidia can no longer regain its lost market, while Huawei Ascend has risen against the odds. Looking back at EDA chip design software, it is, after all, merely software composed of code, not as difficult to procure as AI chips and lithography machines. The advantage of Western EDA lies more in its first-mover status. Chinese chip manufacturers have simply been accustomed to using it for a long time to integrate into the foreign chip ecosystem. However, this US EDA supply cut was not sudden but came at a time when China had made ample preparations. In 2018, the US already targeted Chinese companies using EDA, with ZTE being restricted from using relevant software, severely impacting its semiconductor business. In 2019, Huawei's Kirin chips were briefly cut off from Cadence Design Systems' EDA support, one of the culprits that prevented Huawei phones from producing their own chips before 2023. And in 2022, the US Bureau of Industry and Security BIS for the first time added EDA technology to its export control regulations. However, at that time, there was a threshold. The design of 3nm chips was completely prohibited for Chinese enterprises. Therefore, the US's current EDA sanctions against China were not sudden, but long-planned and gradual. It's just that the May ban was unprecedented in its intensity and comprehensiveness. However, what the US encountered first was the collective enthusiasm of China's domestic EDA companies. Their stock prices surged, with Helen Electronics, Guanglawei, and Huada 9 Days seeing gains exceeding 15% to 20% at one point. From 2019 to 2023, Huawei prepared for nearly 4 years. By March 2023, Huawei had already successfully developed 14nm domestic EDA replacement software. According to Huawei rotating chairman Suji Zhan, this set of EDA tools was developed by Huawei in collaboration with domestic EDA enterprises. Starting in 2018, it took only 3 years to overcome the replacement threshold for 78 sets of tools, completely mastering the entire toolchain from bottom layer code to architecture. In February of that year, Ren Zhengfei himself attended a commendation conference for Huawei's EDA team. 2 years have passed, and Huawei has externally declared that its 7nm Kirin 9020 is self-controlled and supplied in large quantities, without encountering mass production crises. Before the comprehensive US EDA ban, only Huawei had the demand for self-developed chips below 7nm. It is evident that Huawei's localization of EDA has progressed to around 7nm. Besides Huawei, the hidden champion among domestic EDA leaders is Huada 9 Days. This domestic EDA company's market share in China has already broken through to 5.9%. Don't underestimate this share. It has made Huada 9 Days the fourth largest EDA supplier globally, after Cadence Design Systems, Synopsys, and Siemens EDA. Moreover, Huada 9 Days is the only Chinese company capable of handling the entire industry chain of EDA tools for analog circuit design. In the domestic EDA market, Huada 9 Days alone holds half of the market, which is also the reason why Huada 9 Days stock price surged by over 10% in a single day. Currently, according to Cadence Design Systems' financial report for the third quarter of last year, the scale of the Chinese market is equivalent to the sum of Europe, the Middle East, Japan, and Africa, accounting for approximately 13% of the global share. In addition, Cadence Design Systems' largest customer is TSMC. Losing the Chinese market is as unacceptable for the three major EDA giants as it was for Nvidia. 3. Preparing for potential Trump visit to China and US-China rapprochement. Thirdly, this move is likely in preparation for Trump's potential upcoming trip to China and to warm up US-China relations. According to a Japanese media report on June 28, Trump is expected to lead a delegation of CEOs to China for visits and cooperation, similar to his trip to the Middle East in May. At that time, over 30 leading American business figures accompanied Trump to Saudi Arabia, resulting in deals exceeding $2 trillion. In essence, diplomatic visits are for increased cooperation and understanding between two countries. Good relations foster willingness to negotiate business and sign agreements. However, in recent years, the US has been hyping the China threat theory. In March of this year, US intelligence agencies even released a report stating that China is the greatest military and cyber threat to the US. Now, Trump may be trying to downplay the previous anti-China rhetoric, attempting to ease tensions or create a more harmonious public opinion atmosphere to pave the way for his upcoming trip and promote US-China cooperation. On June 29th, during an interview with Trump, the host again displayed the typical American media's unfounded smearing of China, claiming that China launched so-called cyber attacks against the US and stole intellectual property. Unexpectedly, Trump retorted, "Haven't we done that?" saying that these were precisely the actions the US had taken, leaving the host speechless. To quickly obtain rare earth resources from China, high-ranking EU officials have not hesitated to directly appeal to China. However, the EU's plea was met with a 5-year tariff increase from China. At this critical moment, Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić, who has good relations with China, also received a plea for help. On June 29th, Serbian President Vučić suddenly dropped a bombshell. China had promised to accelerate the approval process for exporting key minerals for electric vehicles to Serbia. He also frankly revealed that China explicitly stated that rare earth export restrictions do not target friendly countries like Serbia. This statement instantly disrupted the previously tense Sino-European and Sino-American rare earth geopolitical landscape. Suddenly, European politicians, top executives of car manufacturers, and media public opinion all turned their attention to the president of this small European country, trying to obtain more keys to China's rare earths from him. The whole saga began 2 months ago, in early April, when the US suddenly announced a new round of increased tariffs on China, including electric vehicles, batteries, and mineral materials. Faced with the US's step-by-step pressure, China did not simply retaliate in kind, but struck precisely, initiating export controls on critical minerals, including rare earths. China immediately launched a strategic countermeasure. In the following 2 months, China quickly established a comprehensive export licensing system, conducting a full review of export destinations, uses, and flows. The flow of rare earths received unprecedented meticulous control. This move caught the US and Europe off guard. The US was even forced to hold emergency talks with China in Geneva and London to try to alleviate the crisis. Facts have proven that China's rare earth card was played extremely precisely, hitting the soft spot of Western industries immediately. The EU was even more restless. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen publicly accused China of weaponizing rare earths at a recent summit and strenuously lobbied the US and the EU to jointly deal with China's influence. EU Industry Commissioner Thierry Breton also frequently spoke out, calling for the establishment of strategic rare earth reserves and even threatening an eye for an eye against China, while simultaneously accusing China of blackmail and searching for channels worldwide to plead for leniency. Just as the EU's high-level public opinion offensive reached its climax, European car manufacturers quietly bypassed official EU channels and sought help from Serbian President Vučić. They understood that China would not easily open up rare earth exports to the entire EU, but Serbia's relationship with China was different. This time, the main protagonist of the plea was the European automotive giant Stellantis. As the world's fourth-largest car manufacturer, formed by the merger of France's PSA Group and Italy's FCA, Stellantis's factory in Serbia was on the verge of shutdown due to rare earth shortages. In desperation, they approached Vučić, hoping to coordinate rare earth supplies with China through the Serbian government. Vučić did not disappoint them. He personally communicated with China and quickly received a positive response. China stated that relevant agencies would work closely with Serbia to accelerate the approval process and explicitly pointed out that there are no restrictions on rare earth exports to friendly countries like Serbia. The weight of this statement cannot be underestimated. It is not only a high degree of trust in Serbia but also sends a clear signal to the world: friendship with China is the key to accessing China's rare earths. Serbia's priority was not gained out of thin air but stems from a deep bond of unwavering friendship. Do you remember President Vučić kissing the Chinese flag and tearfully requesting aid at the beginning of the pandemic? That heartfelt trust was reciprocated with planes full of medical supplies and medical experts fighting side by side. When Serbia's car factories sought government assistance due to supply chain issues, Vučić once again sent a letter to China and received a prompt and warm response. The EU was immediately placed in an awkward position. Previously, von der Leyen, holding a magnet, vehemently incited de-Sinicization at the G7 summit. EU ambassador to China Jorge Toledo even complained to China, citing magnet shortages causing panic among European businesses. Amidst these sharp criticisms, China's first batch of rare earth export licenses were actually prioritized for European countries. China showed goodwill, but it is not easily intimidated. While the EU was hitting brick walls everywhere, Serbia became a crucial link in the rare earth channel. Even more intriguing is that Vučić relayed China's promise just as US-China rare earth negotiations approached a critical juncture. On July 9th, the US's temporary tariff measures with several countries are set to expire. China's move to play the no rare earth restrictions card at this time is intended to warn other countries: stand with China and you will benefit. Follow the US's lead and you will suffer. This strategy contains elements of open conspiracy and also a clever way of division. Furthermore, the Stellantis case also taught a lesson to other countries and companies. As long as factories are built in countries friendly to China, China will not create obstacles. Conversely, if rare earths are transferred to other countries or used for non-peaceful purposes, the approval process will be extremely strict. China has not granted widespread access but has precisely allocated resources based on national relations, corporate compliance, and intended use. Serbia, for its part, cherishes this greatly. Vučić explicitly stated that rare earth exports would only be used for domestic factories and would never be transferred to other countries. China also emphasized that all exports must declare specific uses and final destinations, and violators will face strict accountability. Faced with this system, even Ford CEO Jim Farley publicly complained that magnet shortages have forced the closure of multiple production lines, while in contrast, several European car manufacturers have obtained approvals, avoiding large-scale shutdowns. China has transitioned from being a passive resource exporter to an efficient and orderly rare earth regulator. This shift is also a crucial step in the long-term US-China game. The US had previously loudly proclaimed that it would cut off China's supply chains with its allies, but the reality is that they have to submit tens of thousands of export applications to China. They are verbally tough but humbly act. Within the EU, a trend of division has also begun to emerge. Pragmatists represented by Hungary and Spain are starting to seek stronger cooperation with China, while countries with hardline stances toward China, such as Lithuania and Germany, are gradually being marginalized. China has not used a blunt instrument but has differentiated its approach, showing favor where it's earned and cracking down where rules are broken. As Vučić said, Serbia is not a problematic country, and China is not a problematic supplier. This rare earth saga is not just a struggle for resource allocation, but also a competition concerning trust, cooperation, and strategic autonomy. On June 26th, Chinese Ministry of Commerce spokesperson He Yadong stated that export license applications would continue to be processed in accordance with laws and regulations, and the approval rate has increased from 25% to 60%. This means that China is not trying to strangle, but hopes to see genuine sincerity in cooperation. In early July, Foreign Minister Wang Yi will visit the EU headquarters and Germany, and engage in a new round of high-level dialogue between China and Europe with France. The EU ambassador to China also clearly stated that he hopes to resolve the rare earth issue before the summit. This week will determine the direction of China-Europe trade cooperation and test Europe's strategic resolve. Will it continue to follow the US's lead, or will it pragmatically restart cooperation with China? The answer will soon be revealed. Now, Vučić's message has become the most significant footnote in the rare earth game. The phrase, "as long as one condition is met, you can buy rare earths freely," not only earned Serbia trust, but also pointed the way for more countries worldwide. In the future global resource game, the Serbia model is expected to become a new paradigm for diplomacy and economic cooperation, encouraging more countries to abandon hegemonic thinking and work together with China with sincerity and cooperation. In this great change, whoever chooses to stand with China will have more options. China never begrudges resources to truly friendly countries, but it shows no mercy to those who act deceptively. This rare earth saga is a profound strategic reminder. Respect China, and you will have a future. That's all for today's program. If you like it, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Your clicks mean a lot to me. See you next time.